Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, April 7th. We are now several days into the month of April. Time once again to take a look ahead as to what kind of a tropical season we can experience in the Atlantic Basin and what kind of a summer season we can have across the nation. Last summer we had a record number of named storms in the Atlantic Basin, 30 named storms. Of those 30, 13 became hurricanes, and of those 13, 6 actually reached major hurricane status. That's category 3, 4, or 5. I expect an active summer again, not like last summer, but probably above the normal number of named storms. We'll talk about the factors involved and some analog years that featured a similar sea surface temperature anomaly pattern as to what we see right now and what I expect to see over the next 3 to 6 months or so. Let's take a look at the executive summary right up front here to kind of summarize what we'll talk about in this video discussion over the next several minutes. First of all, again, I think we'll have an active season, maybe a slightly above the normal number of named storms. Probably near normal, maybe a tad above the normal for the number of those named storms that actually reach hurricane status, and of those a fewer amount will reach major hurricane status, again category 3 or higher. One of the main factors is La Nina, colder than normal water in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. This started about a year or so ago and really shows no signs of going away completely. There's no signs of it flipping, for example, to an El Nino in the tropical Pacific, which is warmer than normal water. If anything, it may weaken some, but from, let's say, moderately strength conditions right now in the Pacific Ocean to maybe a weak La Nina over the summer season, close to the neutral area. So that will be a big factor. And also the Atlantic Ocean itself, we'll look at here in a moment here, it has some kind of mixed signals in terms of sea surface temperatures. There are some warmer than normal waters in the breeding ground regions of the tropical Atlantic, which of course is a favorable sign for perhaps above normal tropical activity. But at the same time, there's some colder than normal water right off the west coast of Africa, which is generally an inhibiting factor for tropical storm formation. Again, we'll take a look at some analog years that I selected from the last couple of decades that featured a moderate strength La Nina that weakened going into the tropical season to perhaps a weak La Nina or neutral. And by looking at some of the analog years and what kind of weather conditions we experience in those analog years during the summer season, it can give us some clues as to what to expect for the upcoming tropical season and summer season in across the nation. Well, let's take a quick recap of last summer. Again, a whopping number of named storms, 30, a record-breaking year. We had to use the Greek alphabet. We had so many named storms. By the way, the Greek alphabet will no longer ever be used. The World Meteorological Organization thought the Greek alphabet produced some confusion in the general public, so no longer will we use the Greek alphabet. Last summer was only the second time ever, the first time being 2005. That will not happen again, as declared by the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. This is a map of all the tracks of the named storms, 30 named storms from last summer, pretty much all over the place. And again, of these 30, 13 became hurricanes, a very active season. We had some that were your kind of typical waves that come off the west coast of Africa and travel across the tropical Atlantic. We had several that were what I call homegrown type systems that formed in the southwestern Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, and then moved north or northwest into the U.S. So again, last summer was a very, very active season. I don't expect the same kind of record numbers, but again, I do expect a slightly above normal number of named storms in the 2021 tropical season. Well, here, by the way, is a listing of the names that will be used this summer season in the Atlantic Basin. The system is declared, becomes named when it reaches tropical storm status. So all these will be used this summer for any of those tropical systems that actually reach tropical storm status. And again, If we had an unusually large number, we will not be using the Greek alphabet. We will go to other more conventional names. So the Greek alphabet will not be used any longer. Well, now let's get more focused on the factors involved for the upcoming summer and tropical season here. And there are about 3 or 4 different areas I really want to emphasize with respect to the current sea surface temperature anomaly pattern. First of all, out here in the Pacific Ocean, all this blue represents colder than normal La Nina conditions here in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. The equator runs right along this horizontal line right here. So again, we've had this La Nina for the last year or so, and it will not go away completely over the upcoming summer seasons. In some years, La Nina flips to an El Nino. I do not expect that to happen. May go from a moderate strength La Nina to a weak La Nina over the next few months, but this will continue to be a pretty big factor with respect to the tropical season. We look to the Pacific Ocean because what happens in the very, very large Pacific Ocean indeed has an impact on the tropical season in the Atlantic. For example, if we had El Nino conditions in the Pacific Ocean, that often results in strong wind shear, increased wind shear in the tropical Atlantic, which is an inhibiting factor. That will not be the case this summer. So really having a La Nina in the tropical Pacific is a favorable factor for activity in the Atlantic basin because wind shear will, on average, be reduced as compared to those El Nino type summer seasons. Notice also this large area of colder than normal water off the west coast. It's quite an impressive and widespread and persistent area of colder than normal water. Generally, when you have colder than normal water conditions off the west coast of the U.S., that suppresses the upward motion in the atmosphere, leads to a dry weather pattern, at least for the western part of the nation. Indeed, they have been very dry. We'll see later on in this video discussion the drought conditions in the southwest U.S., for example, are classified as extreme, and part of that is due to the La Nina out in the Pacific Ocean and the colder than normal water off the west coast. And again, I believe that'll be a contributing factor to a dry summer season, not only in the western part of the nation, but really down in the south central states. I expect very hot and dry weather conditions from Texas to California over the upcoming season, and this is one of the reasons why the cold water is sitting not only over the tropical Pacific, but also off the west coast of the U.S. Now notice in the Atlantic Ocean, some warmer than normal waters in the breeding ground region of the tropical Atlantic. That is a favorable factor for activity. On the other hand, we have off the west coast of Africa right here some colder than normal water. So really some mixed signals coming from the Atlantic Ocean with some warmer than normal water, which of course is more favorable, and some colder than normal water just off the west coast of Africa, which is generally an inhibiting factor for tropical storm formation. So these are the areas we'll monitor over the next few months and see if things change in terms of the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern around the world. Well, we have just taken a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern right now during the beginning part of April. What about forecast for the upcoming 3 to 6 months or so? This is a plot that shows a compilation of both what we call statistical computer forecast models and dynamical computer forecast models. And we are sitting right here with a moderate strength La Nina. Anything below this neutral line right here is La Nina on this side of that neutral line, and anything above is what we consider El Nino. And the more the negative, the stronger the La Nina, the more the positive, the stronger the El Nino. We now have a moderate strength La Nina, and this is a rolling 3-month period. So when we get into the June, July, August time period, or July, August, September, for example, most models maybe weaken the La Nina to a weak La Nina in this part of the tropical season, and even then the La Nina kind of hangs on average with all these computer forecast models. So again, I do not expect any kind of a significant flip from La Nina to El Nino. If anything, it remains slightly colder than normal out in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. Again, that's generally a more favorable factor for tropical activity in the Atlantic basin. Of course, La Nina has kind of a suppressing factor for upper motion in the atmosphere across the western part of the U.S. It will contribute to a dry summer season, let's say from Texas all the way to California. So again, La Nina will stick around right into the summer tropical season. Well, let's take a look now at one specific forecast for the sea surface temperature anomaly over the latter part of the summer into the fall. This happens to be a forecast map of sea surface temperature anomalies for the August, September, October time periods from a model we call the North American Multi-Model Ensemble. This is really kind of a compilation between many centers in the U.S. NOAA's NCEP, the Center for Environmental Prediction, works with NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, for example, GFDL, all kinds of centers across the nation kind of put this model together. And this is for the latter part of the summer going into the fall. Notice, no doubt about it, this forecast continues La Nina here in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean, with blue here representing colder than normal water, a little bit continuing off the west coast of the U.S. as well, and a lot of warmer than normal water in the Atlantic part of the nation. So again, really this combination here of La Nina in the Pacific Ocean and some warmer than normal water, at least in the tropical breeding grounds of the Atlantic, suggests perhaps above normal tropical activity this summer in the Atlantic basin. Also, they continue kind of a colder than normal batch of water here just off the west coast of Africa. So again, this kind of confirms the compilation of forecast models that we just saw a moment ago. This is from the North American Multi-Model Ensemble computer forecast model system. Well, now let's focus in on analog years, and what I did was I took a look back at some years that featured moderate strength La Nina in the springtime that weakened to a weak La Nina or even neutral condition during the summer season, because that's what I expect to see this summer. And I happen to find 6 different years that actually all occurred in the last couple of decades since the turn of the century. And we can take a look back, see what kind of weather conditions we had when you average together those 6 analog years to give us a clue about this upcoming summer season. This is the temperature anomaly pattern across the nation when you average together those 6 analog years, and virtually warmer than normal from coast to coast. A few areas show up in white or near normal, but notice warmer than normal in the northeastern part of the nation, and really, again, warmer than normal pattern here across the nation showing up on this particular map in yellow and orange and red. And notice very hot conditions across Texas in these particular analog years. And again, I'm expecting a very hot and dry summer from Texas all the way to California, and this is one of the reasons why what happened during these analog years. Again, I think it features these particular years featured the same kind of sea surface temperature anomaly pattern that I expect to see over the next 3 to 6 months or so. Now, in terms of precipitation anomalies for these particular years, we kind of have a split in the nation here. These years featured wetter than normal conditions throughout much of the eastern part of the nation. Again, this is another factor. I believe we'll have a warmer and wetter summer season in much of the eastern part of the nation, including the northeast U.S. and the mid-Atlantic region. But notice out here, the western half of the nation, for the most part, normal or drier than normal, especially in Texas. So again, I'm expecting a very hot and dry summer season from Texas to California. Near normal in California during the summer season really means dry. I mean, a normal summer season in California is dry. So when you see near normal here, you don't expect to see much rain at all. So again, very hot and dry from Texas to California, but warmer and wetter in much of the eastern part of the nation. Well, one other map I'd like to show here is a map across the nation of drought conditions at this current time as we're going into the tropical season, because the soil moisture can certainly play an important role in what happens in the summer season. If there's a lot of moisture in the top layers of the soil, then that inhibits the chance, reduces the chance for an extremely hot weather pattern in that particular region, because what happens in the atmosphere is that the sun actually heats the top of the ground, the ground level, then in turn transfers heat to the lower and middle part of the atmosphere. So if there's a lot of moisture in the top layers of the ground, then some of the sun's radiation will actually be used up in the evaporation of that moisture before it heats up the lower part of the atmosphere. So those areas that are currently in drought conditions, and in some cases here the extreme drought conditions, you have a much higher chance of extremely hot weather this upcoming summer season. Look at this, really, from Texas all the way to California. The very dark colors here represent anywhere from extreme drought to exceptional drought right now, from basically Texas all the way to California. Again, that increases the chance for an exceptionally hot summer because of the evaporation or lack of evaporation of moisture in the top layers of the soil. So again, this is a factor here leading me to believe Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, all the way to California, including parts of the central and southern Rockies, could have a very, very hot and dry summer season. Meanwhile, much of the eastern half of the nation, nearly normal soil moisture or nearly normal conditions in terms of drought. That's a good thing in a way. It'll prevent, even though I expect warmer than normal conditions in the mid-Atlantic, for example, much of the eastern U.S., I don't expect it to be exceptionally hot because there's a decent amount of moisture in the top layers of the soil right now. In fact, some of that is from the melting snow the past winter season. Anywhere up north and east, the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, for example, had a lot of snow during the winter season, and that snow melt is certainly paving the way for normal, maybe even a little bit above normal moisture conditions, top layers of the soil in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast U.S. So again, this is an important map to look at as we head into the summer season. Well, let's just wrap up again, going back to the executive summary again. I expect it to be an active season in the tropical basin. The tropical Atlantic basin, not quite as active as last year, but probably above normal in terms of the number of named storms, maybe normal in terms of the number of those named storms that reach hurricane status and major hurricane status. La Nina is a big factor, mixed signals coming from the Atlantic Ocean. I expect warmer than normal and wetter than normal conditions throughout much of the eastern part of the nation, perhaps 2-3 degrees on average above normal in terms of the temperature pattern, and maybe 2-4 inches above normal in much of the eastern U.S. in terms of the precipitation anomalies, and very hot and dry weather conditions from Texas to California, the south central, the southwestern U.S., and across the west coast. Unfortunately, that really suggests we could have a bad wildfire season later on in the fall going into the winter. October, November could very well be a bad wildfire season because of the very hot and dry summer weather that I expect to see California all the way to the southwestern part of the nation. And again, I've taken a look back at some analog years which give us a signal as to what we could expect during the upcoming summer season. So we'll monitor all of this over the next few weeks, few months, and certainly tweak the forecast if we need to. That's it for now for the 2021 Atlantic Basin tropical season and summertime outlook. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.